Is CrossFit.com programming still as random as it always was? We're gonna dive in today to a week of the programming and find out. What's up everyone, Jason Brown here, the king of programming. We're back for another program review. For those of you that are new to my channel, I am a strength and conditioning coach of 20 years and I work on getting people serious results through efficient programming. Everything I do is about programming. So if you're looking to learn more about training programs, you're in the right place. If you are a fitness professional and you're learning how to write better programs, you are also in the right place. We are gonna delve into a lot of great things, a lot of fundamentals of program design on these reviews, as well as other future comments. So if you're here, appreciate having you. Today, we're gonna talk about a week of this programming. Now, for anyone watching today, we are starting off on the 6th of January. We're gonna go through 6 workouts. But before we do that, I wanna give you guys some backstory to know where I am coming from. So I got involved in CrossFit back in 2006, and I actually spent about a year of my life using CrossFit.com. I think that might come as a surprise to some of you that know me, but I did spend about a year doing the workouts on CrossFit.com. I never missed a workout. Even if I went away on vacation, I would do the workouts. I would even come home sometimes and make up workouts that I had missed. So I spent a lot of time doing these workouts. And what I saw early on was twofold. I saw that, one, I was having a lot of fun doing it. It was really nice to just kind of do something different and go outside of my comfort zone. But the other end of it was that I did start to lose a lot of strength. I was a strength and power athlete prior to that. And having gone into the military, I knew that I was certainly lacking in the endurance department, which is kind of what got me, was the catalyst to getting into CrossFit. So I spent a lot of time doing these workouts and kind of analyzing them. And what I found to be kind of the limiting factor of that programming was, number one, it was pretty random. There didn't seem to be any patterns across a year's worth of programming. This is something I was looking at then, but keep in mind, this is 2006. It's a long time ago. I certainly didn't have the lens that I have today. But in addition to that, I started to think about ways to start to pair some of my conjugate style training with some of the elements of CrossFit.com. Now, fast forward to present day, my programming is heavily influenced by CrossFit. We use a lot of mixed modality styles of training within the confines of a very scheduled and, wouldn't say rigid, but a template that is very systematic in the sense that we're able to plug certain pieces in. But long story short, there is certainly a lot of limitations to the programming. But I would be remiss to not mention that I came from this background. I later opened a CrossFit gym, and coming from the strength and conditioning world into CrossFit, and then to being a gym owner some years later, and then getting involved with writing programming for CrossFit gyms. For those of you that don't know, I wrote programming for 200 plus CrossFit gyms, and I had about 20,000 people a day using my training. That was a conjugate-based CrossFit programming. And I think it's important for you guys to know where I'm coming from, and that, I've had a lot of people chime in on some of my reviews that I've done of CrossFit programs and say that I don't know anything about CrossFit. I've actually done over 10 CrossFit certifications. I did my L2 certification, I did a coach's prep, I did gymnastics, I did a lot of great certifications. I learned a ton from CrossFit, but one thing that I did learn was that in the programming department, it was very limited. It wasn't leaning on a lot of science. There were certainly things that were more kind of thrown up in the air. And while this is certainly a program that people can follow and get results, I think there are some things that we can do better to get you even better results. And if you guys hang on to the end of the video, I'm gonna talk about what I would potentially do to still use this program, but maybe make some improvements so we can potentially start moving forward, but have some of the elements of this intact. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So for those of you that don't know, CrossFit follows a 3-on, 1-off style of training. So you'll see 3 work days, and then you'll see a rest day. You'll see 3 more work days, so on and so forth, and they repeat that pattern. Now, CrossFit follows a lot of different methodologies as far as their training. We certainly have things like gymnastics, we have Olympic lifting, powerlifting, you have monostructural or your cyclical pieces, your aerobic pieces. And then, of course, mixing and matching some of that stuff together in pieces like a couplet, which is 2 exercises. A workout like Fran, for those of you that don't know, it's thrusters and pull-ups, is a really, really brutal anaerobic style workout, but it's very simplistic too, which is really cool about that workout. You have workouts that consist of 3 exercises called triplets. You have workouts that will have 4. You have workouts that have multiple, something like a chipper where you're chipping away at 1 exercise at a time. And then of course, we start thinking about different modalities or different domains of training. We have things like task domain or time domain. So we could do something like as many rounds as possible in a certain amount of time, or we could do 5 rounds of X, Y, and Z for time. So there is a lot of ways to skin the cat, which is again, these are some of the cool elements that I love about CrossFit. These are the things that made me fall in love with CrossFit back when I did. And, I think that there is certainly a lot of novelty to this. We're doing different things all the time, but one of the limitations was always not having enough repetition with our basic things, our squat, our hinge, our lunge, our push, our pull, our carry pattern. Those are things that we can do on a repeated basis and get a big bang for the buck from. So, just again, wanted to get that stuff out of the way. I think it's very important for you guys to know the context of some of this stuff. For those of you that are CrossFit people, I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of people come on this video and not like what I have to say, but fundamentally speaking, there are some things that we need to have in a good program, and repetition is one of those things that for me is a non-negotiable. Now, when I look at any program, regardless of it's CrossFit or it's a strength and conditioning program, I do look at the fundamentals of program design, things like exercise order, sets, reps, and rest intervals, conditioning. Clearly, there is going to be conditioning in this program, but what types of conditioning are there? I remember when I did my L2 certification, initially it was called the coach's prep, and then they changed it to L2. I asked a lot of questions about programming, as you guys could imagine. And now this was over 10 years ago now, but needless to say, I asked a lot of questions about why we were fitting certain things in with the week and what was the rhyme or reason for specific pieces or doing repeated patterns on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of times the seminar staff didn't have an answer for me. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that, because I don't think the education in CrossFit is strong. There's not a lot of programming science, if you will, where we're learning how to structure things and potentially plan things out a little bit more. And, one of the tenets of CrossFit is unknown and unknowable, which, to be honest, guys, is bullshit. We know what we're training for. We know what's going to potentially happen. When you train a lot of different things concurrently, you can get prepared for the unknown and unknowable in a more systematic way, where we're balancing out what we're doing and allowing people to make consistent progress across multiple domains, multiple modalities, improving the aerobic system, improving power, improving strength, hypertrophy. We can do all those things a little more systematically. So, getting off on a long topic here, but I do think this stuff is very important for you guys watching to understand and to know before seeing what's here and understanding how I'm going to give feedback on this. Now, I will say, to get out of the way, I think that there are a lot of great things to this program. Simplicity is always one of the things. And even looking at this first workout, there is some simplicity to it. But when we break this down across 6 days, hopefully you guys will be able to see what is potentially lacking. So our first workout, again, this is January 6th, so you guys can go back and look at this, is to accumulate 6 minutes of a dead hang on a pull-up, on the pull-up bar. And then every time you drop, you're completing 100 double unders and 30 V-ups. Now, there are scaling options here. I know that they've done a great job at adding additional scaling options to the programming now, which is something I didn't have back when I was doing these workouts back in 06. But for all intents and purposes, there's really not a whole lot to this workout. Now, I think the argument in CrossFit is like, well, it's functional and it's, preparing you for the unknown and unknowable. But if you're coming new to this program and you're starting off on January 6th, and this is your first workout, there is a lot more to be desired. There's 6 minutes here. You're training for 6 minutes. Now, of course, I think a lot of people that are using this style of training will say, well, I did a warm-up and I did some skill-based work, but that's not what's here. So I'm assessing what's here. So what's here is hanging from the pull-up bar for 6 minutes, and every time you drop, you complete double unders and V-ups. So we have a core pattern. We have obviously, our jumping rope, which is skill-based movement, doing double unders, which is certainly gonna jack the heart rate up, and then our static hold. So again, kind of a lot to be desired here. I think that for all intents and purposes, I don't know if I would really, this is something I would plug into my own training. I certainly would, but let's move on. And what we're gonna do is today, we're gonna go through these workouts and then we're gonna kind of recap what we've seen and how that potentially fits together across these 6 days. Now, I know it's only 6 days, but as someone that has done CrossFit.com programming extensively, this is kind of what I'm seeing here is already kind of what I experienced when I was using this programming myself. So let's move on to Tuesday. Day 2, 5 rounds for time. So we've got a task domain workout. We've got a couplet, we've got 2 patterns. We've got a push jerk and we've got a back squat with a weight for male and a weight for female. So 135 pound for male, 95 for female. And essentially what we are doing is 60 reps of a push jerk and a back squat. So we've got a squatting pattern and a pressing pattern. So let's recap the day before. We did kind of some more, jumping rope. We've got some core work. We've got a dead hang. So we're already starting off the week. We're lacking some fundamental patterns. We're lacking a upper pull pattern. If you want to count that static hold in the pull apart, you could, but there's no eccentric component to that. So I don't know if I would count that. There's no hinging. And these are just kind of what we're seeing in the first 2 workouts. So let's move on. So day 3 of the week, 30 muscle ups for time. So again, I don't have to point this out to you, but we've got a pressing pattern, we've got a squatting pattern, we've got a static hold from the pull-up bar, we've got double unders, we've got some core work. And now we're gonna hit some more pressing with the inclusion of the upper pull. Obviously, we've got a pull component to a ring muscle up, 30 muscle ups for time. And just for the hell of it, I wanna pull up the scaling options because I'm pretty sure they're gonna have a pull-up in there as one of those scaling options, and probably a push-up or a dip, and they do. Okay, so we've got upper pull and upper push today. We squatted the day before. We still haven't hit a hinge pattern, okay? And again, this is the first 3 workouts of the week. So day 4 of the week, Thursday is gonna be a rest day, so we're just gonna move on past that and go to Friday. So on Friday, we are hitting another task domain workout. This is 8 rounds for time, so a longer workout, certainly gonna lean more on the aerobic system. We've got a 400-meter run, we've got 15 burpee box jumps, we've got 10-calorie air bike, and then we've got 6 alternating dumbbell snatch. All right, so this is certainly a longer workout, and they give you some strategy, they give you scaling options, which again, I like. I think that's obviously gonna be very much needed, especially when you get into some of those complex patterns like the ring muscle up on the Wednesday prior to this. Again, longer aerobic piece, you're gonna have heart rate that's kind of all over the place because we're doing a global pattern of burpee box jump. We're going from floor or from standing down to floor to box, back down. So a lot of, certainly a high demand as far as the cardiorespiratory is concerned for that particular pattern. We've got an air bike. Now, if you're sprinting on that across all those sets, then it's certainly going to lean more on anaerobic metabolism. But you're going to, just by virtue of how long this workout is, you're certainly going to have a higher reliance on the aerobic system. And then we've got an alternating dumbbell snatch, which it looks like it's 6 reps total. It doesn't say each, but needless to say, we've got kind of, again, just more of a longer piece, which does fit in because we do need that. We haven't had anything longer duration across this week or across these workouts of this week of programming here. So let's move on and let's see what we've got for Saturday. So we've got now a time domain workout, which is 12 minutes. We're gonna have an AMRAP style, so as many rounds as possible. We've got 5 pull-ups, 10 knee to elbow, and 15 goblet squats. So again, we've got a squatting pattern, we've got some more core work, we've got an upper pull, all right? So let's recap what we've talked about here across this 6 sessions of training. Now, if we go forward, I'm sure you're probably gonna see, and actually you don't see any hinging. We've got a clean and jerk. They've got some dumbbell push-up, box jump. For those of you guys that have done CrossFit.com for a long time, maybe you've seen this to be the case, but what I tend to see for someone that has experienced this programming extensively is that there tends to be fundamental patterns missing. Now, if we look at just these 6 workouts, we've got no hinging, right? If you wanna count a dumbbell snatch from the floor as a hinging pattern, you could, because you have to bend over to pick up the dumbbell. But as far as keeping the hamstrings under tension or hitting the glute complex, there's nothing happening there, okay? So not a whole lot in this week of programming. We are missing out on some single leg work. We've squatted twice, no single leg, okay? Let's put that on the shelf as one of the things that we're missing. We do have a fair amount of pressing, not an overabundance. What I would tend to see, I have seen in the past, is that we will certainly hit the shoulder joint way more than we should. And a lot of times people don't understand that you're hitting the shoulder joint. You do a kip and pull up, you're a lot of stress on the glenohumeral joint. If you are doing a snatch, a lot of stress on the GH joint. If you are doing obviously a pressing pattern, you're hitting the same joint just in different ways. So there is a lot of stress that exists on the glenohumeral joint, which is our shoulder joint, and it is a very mobile joint in the human body. And people tend to run into shoulder issues with CrossFit. That is one thing I saw owning a gym for 5 years, programming for other CrossFit boxes, is that when you do have an overabundance of pressing across the week and not as much upper pull, we run into some issues, okay? So I think overall, this week of programming is completely lacking to me. If I wanted to keep these workouts intact or keep the feel of CrossFit, we could do that pretty easily. It wouldn't be overly hard to do. We could essentially have a little bit more strength emphasis. I think the strength portion of CrossFit is very much lacking. When you have someone do just back squatting as your strength day, which is a common modality, you'll do a single element modality in CrossFit, you are missing out on fundamental movement patterns, all right? So let's talk about the pros and cons of this program. The pros of this program is that it is novel, it's pretty simple, there's not a whole lot of complexity here. Ring muscle up, you could probably make the case that who's gonna benefit from that? Obviously people that are more advanced, but I think as a whole, the simplicity of CrossFit.com programming is one of the things that I do like. And that was one of the things that drew me to it early on, was that it was pretty clean, it was pretty straightforward. Now, if we talk about the cons of this, there's a lot of them. We are missing out on vital development of our foundational movement patterns. If I wanted to just pick apart one thing with CrossFit, it would be that. It would be training the RDL, our hinge pattern. It would be training a upper pull more consistently with row patterns, face pull patterns. I mean, a lot of ways to skin a cat as far as the upper back is concerned. So there is a lot of fundamental movement patterns that are missing. Loaded carries, rotational work, those are things that I would have in this program. I think CrossFit does have a steady state component as far as the aerobic system is concerned, but really not enough of it. And when you add the element of time or a competition to these workouts, it removes people's ability to say, you know what, I'm gonna take it easy today. People need more of that. So one thing I wanna tell you guys is that when I program for CrossFit Gym, this is what I did. I would have a strength element be a part of at least 3 days a week. So maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we would have some serious strength element where we would hit our row pattern, we'd hit a hinge, we'd hit a pressing pattern, usually a horizontal pressing, because CrossFit does involve a lot of overhead pressing by virtue of just what it is. We're doing clean and jerks and snatch, and obviously, various things I've mentioned, wall balls. So a lot of stress on the shoulder joint. So we would hit it from different angles, but we would really prioritize hinging. We would do glute hip thrusts. We would do RDLs, glute ham raises if gyms had access to it. So a lot of different ways we can potentially leverage training the posterior chain without it having to compromise anything else we're doing. So those are things that are mainstays. The other thing I would do is I would include longer duration aerobic pieces on the other days. Tuesday and Thursday, Saturday usually be longer duration, more sustained effort across 30, 40 minutes at a time. And sometimes they would vary in terms of how they be delivered. We might be working with a partner. We might do various pieces and then include some body weight work or light loaded carry. So a lot of ways to go about that. So these are some of the elements that I use in my own training. So, for those of you that are on my training, some of the stuff might sound familiar, but we would have a set schedule with where things would be within the week. Now, people that came on certain days might miss certain elements. That's kind of one of the downsides of group training, is that you come in, maybe you only come certain days of the week and you might miss things. And usually what we would do is we would encourage people to say, hey, if you're missing out on all this strength work, you've got to try to find ways to potentially get you in here on these days when we were doing some of this stuff. Back then I leaned on more of a upper lower approach where we would train specific patterns on specific days. Now personally what I would do is more full body, and I actually wrote an article on Elite FTS about how I would do programming for CrossFit boxes now versus how I did it then. And these are some of the things. The conditioning piece is still very much intact, but we would prioritize the things that people need. People need to get stronger. People need more strength in their posterior chain. People need to down-regulate the stress response. We do this through aerobic training. So all of these things come together and we have a program that allows more people to get better results with what's there, as opposed to we write a program for the highest level and then we scale down. I don't believe in that, and I think that this program is missing a lot. If I was to sit here with you guys and go through 30 days of it, it wouldn't be a whole lot different. It would look pretty similar to what's here. Now, of course, there would be other elements included, but overall, when you only are exposed to certain things at certain times of the month, you are missing a lot. I would hit those patterns I mentioned every single week. We would hit the RDL or a hinge pattern, a single leg RDL, a glute hip thrust, you name it, we would hit that stuff every single week. And I would use the same variations for 3 to 4 weeks at a time so people can improve week to week. And again, overabundance of pulling upper back work, people need it. So again, a lot of stuff that we could potentially do. This is not how I would do it. And if you are trying to get stronger or more fit or just live longer, look better, this isn't how I would do it. So this is not an approved program. I feel bad saying that because I have a lot of experience with CrossFit. I have a lot of appreciation and gratitude towards CrossFit, but this is not how I would train someone. And as always, guys, see you on the next review, and results are king.